Hello, everyone, and welcome back to People Jew Wanna Know podcast. This episode is brought to you by P&T Knitwear Bookstore and Podcast Studio, as well as Orwashers. The studio actually smells of delicious baked goods as we speak. Today, I'm interviewing Keith Cohen, the owner and CEO of Orwashers, an iconic New York City Jewish bakery. Orwashers Bakery is a certified New York City institution. It was founded in 1916 as a small storefront on the Upper East Side by a Jewish-Hungarian immigrant named Abraham Orwasher, who lived behind the bakery with his family and made deliveries by horse and buggy. Orwashers was born out of a desire to serve the local immigrant community and focused on high-quality rye, black, and grain breads that reflected the traditions of their homeland. After being passed on from generation to generation in the Orwasher family, the business was sold to Keith Cohen in 2008. Since then, Keith and his team have worked hard to respect the brand's rich history while incorporating a distinctly current point of view. As part of this evolution, Orwashers partners with regional farmers and has developed a new line of contemporary artisan breads to go along with a classic lineup of rye bread, bagels, sourdough, and sweets like black and white cookies, rugelach, and babka. For the episode, Keith brought me an immense amount of Orwashers products to try. Different breads, pastries, and his favorite product, the apple honey cake. If you know what lekach is, which by the way is also one of my favorites as well, the apple honey cake is very reminiscent of lekach. It was a tremendous privilege to interview Keith and get a glimpse of his story, not only as a successful businessman, but also as a proud Jew. Keith is an incredibly humble individual. And I didn't even realize that, like in the Jewish food world, I was walking into a conversation with a celebrity and a legend of sorts. Keith really knows the business, and his products are very good. But aside from being a bread guru, it was fascinating for me to explore Keith's Jewish identity. He's a very proud Jew, and he actually bragged offline that he was the valedictorian of his Hebrew school. He said that he even went to yeshiva for some time, but told me he got kicked out for being distracting or something like that. Keith's dad was even part of the Jewish Defense League back in the day. And I know that JDL is now considered a radical organization, but at the time, it was really a way for Jews to feel empowered, like they could defend themselves. Kind of like the Minutemen during the era of the Jewish Mafia, which Keith and I also discuss on the podcast. I'm really excited for you to learn more about Keith, and I have to share that after we were done recording, Keith, his marketing lead Eric, and I went to Katz and shared a delicious dinner. This is really why I love doing what I do. I get to connect with the most inspiring, fun, generous people in our community, and I'm just so grateful I get a piece of their time. It was such a warm dinner and one that I will look back really fondly on. In the meantime, I'm going to go eat my 10th black and white cookie from Orwashers, but you all please enjoy this episode. Hey, Keith. Welcome to People Jew Wanna Know podcast. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you so much for coming. And thank you for these delicious baked goods that I will be eating for the next year because of the volume you brought this evening.
Well, as a lifelong Jewish person, you always overfeed your guests. And while I'm a guest here, I also feel like I'm a guest.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm really excited to try these. And it's a pleasure to have you on. Let's get right to it. Tell us about yourself. What do you do and how did you get there?
My name is Keith Cohen. I recently turned 54. I can't believe it. I still think I'm like 34. And I own one of the most iconic bakeries, I would think, in the country. I'm not trying to brag. Definitely one of the oldest, called Orwashers, that has been around in the city since 1916. So, it was third generation, and I took it over at the end of 2007. And people who are old enough to remember, 2008 was the worst financial crisis, not only in the U.S., but worldwide. So I got a real quick schooling on how to navigate a small business during that time. And when I look back, I really enjoyed all of it. When I was going through it, it wasn't so much fun. But the cool thing was being able to connect with the community at that point. So what happened during that time, white tablecloth restaurants went away in more favor. Brooklyn, there was a food resurgence in Brooklyn. It was local, for people that remember all the local stuff, small carbon footprint. And I was able to not only perfect some of the old-time products that Orwasher had that had fallen by the wayside, right? Pumpernickel, rye, that weren't as popular. I was able to work on a bunch of new breads and really get inspiration from that, a little bit from desperation. right? So really the desperation got me for inspiration. So during that time, we perfected our craft, we came up with new breads, and we reinvented Orwashers for a much younger generation. But the reason I actually bought the business was that legacy of knowing people or meeting people that said, my grandparents took me here when I was a little child, and all these different stories. And even now, I'm not a full-blown celebrity, but it's nice when someone introduced me and they say, this guy who owns Orwashers, like, oh my God, I go there and they know exactly where it is. They know as much about the business as I do. So I really I rejoice in that.
No, it's definitely a staple New York Jewish venue, if I may. And I think about this family that had this business for 100 years and they passed it from generation to generation. And you came in and you kind of saved it and revamped it. Talk to me about that 100-year history. What was the Orwashers family like? What was that business? And what kind of legacy do you want to leave with the next generation of Orwashers?
I didn't get the opportunity to really interact. So it started by the grandfather. The father, his name was Lewis, really took it to its heights in the city in the 80s and the early 90s. The grandson took it over. And during that time, there was a huge bread resurgence throughout the country, artisan bread and everything else. And quite honestly, it didn't modernize itself. I got into the business when I was 23 years old, mostly just by chance. I needed a job, and it was better than waiting tables. At that point, I was living in Brooklyn Heights. I was waiting tables. There was an offer to work at an artisan, it wasn't even artisan then, bakery in Tribeca. It was called Tribeca Oven.
You baked bread?
That's what you did? I didn't do anything. I was hired as a salesperson. And then all of a sudden, I found myself fixing the machinery, getting involved in production, because I was a commissioned salesperson. So if I ever wanted to make another dime, I'd have to sell more. So I started to get really involved with it. And bread baking is very mechanical, right? There's chemistry, but there's also the mechanics of it. And I'm pretty handy. So I took a liking to it. My hopes of going to law school were squashed, mostly because you need good grades to go to law school usually. I didn't know that. Well, I kind of knew that. I mean, that's the reason I'm getting to med school, right? If they give me practical, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon. Had they just been able to thrust me into med school and to do operations and teach them, I'd be great. I have good hands. So I worked for this company for many years, and I learned the science of baking. I wasn't a full-time baker at all, but I fell in love with what I did, and I was good at it. And I think in a lot of professions, that is really the key to being exemplary at what you do. You have to be good at it and also love it at the same time. And I don't know which one comes first. So the legacy I want to leave with Orwashers really is having it set up for that next century, right? How do I take this business when I took it over, 92 years old? How do I bring that where it lasts? Not 100 years, but 200 years. And you do have certain businesses now that are not quite approaching 200 years, but if you look at Peter Luger's, or you have Pete's Tavern, or one of our great customers on the Upper East Side is Butterfield, Citarella, right? Those are 100-year-old plus businesses. And I really want to be able to position ourselves. And that's a testament to the legacy of the product, right? And everything else that goes on. When you think about it, Orwashers has outlasted 2 world wars, right? You name it in the city. And it's a real testament to I think it's overused now, the word iconic, okay? But I do like to think there's an iconic part to what we've done, and feeding people is so important. So if I can continue that part of feeding people, having a place where it's a little bit of an oasis, and we're talking retail, not even just wholesale. There's something really just fundamental goodness.
I had no idea that Orwashers supplied bread to restaurant groups, for example. I thought it was just a bakery that you could just go and buy as a regular consumer. But now when you talk about supplying restaurants, it makes sense. Well, it's a more strategic decision. And when you came in, you probably saw the opportunity to expand because suddenly you have a lot more volume that you can sell. But at the same time, you have to expand your facilities to be able to take on the volume. When you came in to take a look at the business, how did you decide what type of player you wanted to be? Like a volume player, maybe a cost player, a high quality, artisanal player? How did you make that decision? Or did you already come in knowing what you were going to do?
I will say this. I was very good at wholesale. So the company I worked for, I did a lot of sales, very good at it. I was also very friendly with a lot of retailers, top retailers. I do have a retail mentality. So I figured I would be able to improve the retail and really go full force on wholesale. And
you took your talents to their business. It makes sense.
But I will say this as well. My former brother-in-law told me when he left his law firm in Dublin, Ireland, and went on his own, all the people, when he was saying, I'm going to start my own practice, that said, oh, we'll go with you, they never showed up. And the same thing with me, right? I had a lot of wholesale business that said to me all these years, if you ever had your own place, we'll go with you, Keith. They didn't show up. I was left empty-handed. And because of that struggle, it made me not only a better baker, because I had to come up with new recipes.
Yeah, the product had to deliver.
It made me a much more talented business person, which in retrospect really got us through the COVID period. But, the wholesale business is much larger than the retail business at this point, and the breadth of who we sell to, is large, and I'm really proud of it. But you're only as good as your last bake. So you have to be very consistent, and you have to be, your barometer, your bar has to be set so high, which is difficult, right? Because it's difficult to be working in that environment, but it's also satisfying at the same time when you're one of the best.
Yeah. And how many SKUs or products do you sell?
You sound like my CFO. We sell too many, right? I mean, it's probably 150 different items.
Wow. Okay.
That's not even just the pastry stuff at retail. We're talking about wholesale.
Mm-hmm. That includes the wholesale products.
So, it becomes a little bit more difficult and unwieldy to do, but I think it really gives us a really good picture and bandwidth to appeal to the mass market.
So this is interesting. I don't think the people that listen to my podcast even know this about me, but when I went to college, I studied supply chain.
Really?
Which is highly related to what you do, at least in some part. And we learned a lot about how a business would determine how many SKUs to sell or how to decide what's the top performing SKU and how to go to market. Like, will you compete on price? Will you compete on quantity? And this reminds me of a very distinct story in my memory where we had this famous executive from Cargill come in to speak to our college about expanding internationally. And Cargill makes all sorts of products, a set of which is bread products. And this executive told the story of how Cargill identified a gap in the market in India. In India, they really like different types of breads, but a lot of India was still rural. So they used very archaic equipment, like literally using some stone bat to ground the flour. And so Cargill saw an opportunity to, it's not a bat, is it?
No.
What is it called?
Well, but it comes back from like stone ground milling. It's a much simpler way.
Mortar and pestle?
Pestle. Yeah.
I'm English as a second language. Okay. Well,
what's your primary language?
Russian.
Okay.
So anyway, this would not be the first time I completely invent a word.
It's okay.
For the sake of the podcast, but I think everyone knew what I meant. Anyways, I digress. So Cargill saw an opportunity to bring in really advanced equipment to start making a lot of bread and take over the market in India for bread making. And so they bought the nicest Swiss machinery. They opened a warehouse in like the best area. They came in very confident. And when they started making their bread, nobody would buy it.
Wanted.
And they were trying to figure out what it was about this Indian bread made in the back of some shack that everybody wanted and what it was about Cargill that no one wanted to buy. And so at first they realized that because they were using this mortar
and pestle,
thank you.
It's a different product.
Yes. The taste of the bread was different because the stone from this contraption would create this like stony flavor to the bread. And so Cargill went and purchased bags of stone and they would pour stone into their fancy Swiss equipment to try to produce artificially the stony flavor that everyone was used to. And still nobody would buy it. It was a total failure. And so the moral of the story from this executive was like a lesson about failure. And he talked about how at no point did they consider talking to anybody at all from the Indian market. And they just came in confidently thinking they could do it. And at the time I was taking a business ethics class. I was an impressionable college student. So I raised my hand and I was like, don't you think this kind of comes down to greed? Like Cargill's own greed got in the way of their success. And they brought in a completely external team on this project. They had like a consulting group. They didn't employ a single person from India. And I thought it was such a foolish thing, an entitled thing. And so I asked him this like sassy question and he was like, yeah, Margarita, but we're here to make money. Like, what do you think this is about?
It was a certain sense of hubris, right? Forget the greed part. It's, I know more than
Exactly.
everyone else.
And so he was like, you know what? I agree with you. And we're here to make money. And this is how we thought we'd make money. The craziest part of that story is all my friends were like, that guy was so man, what a snobby executive. Later that semester, I was going to study abroad, and the university issued me a scholarship from a donor for gifted students who were going to study abroad. He was the executive that awarded me the scholarship.
Wow.
And he had no idea that it was me.
That's very cool.
It was just awarded by the university, but that was the same man who came to speak to us. And I was like, shoot.
So what that shows you is there's two sides to a lot of people, right? And having humility, I think, is really important. And at least me as a business owner, and I think other people that know me, there's a lot of humility. Okay. I love what I do and I love the accolades, but like I said previously, I'm as good as my last bake. I mean, no different than if you looked at an actor, right? You can have some flops, right? And, you're as good as your last movie. Maybe actors wouldn't say that, but I can imagine, or a boxer, right? You're as good as your last fight, right? You can't continue. So I think I look at the business as being, as I said, I think we're one of the best bakers out there, but I'm never going to get full of myself. And I think that is the kiss of death for any business. And you look at what you just told me, Cargill, they could absorb that loss, but that was hubris and not showing any humility or understanding. And I've had 17 years of learning the business. So what I didn't spend in school and business school or MBA school, I got real life experience.
We say in show business, actually, I don't know why I said we, because we is not in show business.
Okay.
Those who work in show business say that you always want to leave on a high, right? Or comedians, you always want to leave on a laugh.
Correct.
So that people remember you by your best, not by some failure. And you brought this up earlier, and I want to come back to it. You talked about a resurgence of bread. And now, at least in Manhattan, it feels like there's a resurgence of Jewish food and Israeli cuisine, and it's very popular. It's very trendy. What is your favorite part about Jewish food and culture here in Manhattan?
Well, growing up in it, right? So believe it or not, I guess baking is perfect for me because my palate is not that varied. So there's a lot of stuff. I mean, you have Katz's down the block here. That appeals to me. My good friend Alyssa, who owns Edith's, has also been part of this resurgence. By the way, her bread and stuff is baked on Orwashers stuff. I'll put that in. I think culturally, New York City is the hub of Jewish culture in America. There's over 1 million Jews that live in New York City. And a lot of the Jewish food over the years, has been absorbed into other places. Lately, probably in the past 5-6 years, there's been a resurgence of that old style, but with a new twist on it, right? Of inherently Jewish food. May not be kosher, there's some mixing of milk and meat, but the basis is somehow a Jewish style, which when you think about New York City, that was, having Katz's Deli, yes, Katz, but there was 50 other delis all over the place and appetizing stores, and there's not much left. They were replaced. Even the old style Jewish bagel places. There's a big resurgence of bagel places, but that was a Jewish niche business. Bagels, bialys, all of those things. And they started to disappear, and now they're coming back. You think about the makeup of the city. Bagel stores and pizza places are some of the hottest businesses, and now bakeries as well, right? There's a lot of competition, a lot of good bakeries out there. So, not only are you talking about like appetizing stores, but you're just talking about that old style product.
Yeah, maybe nostalgic or comforting.
That were the basis of Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, all of those.
I was thinking about it, like, why is a black and white cookie a Jewish thing?
It's not only a Jewish thing, it's a New York thing. And
what is going on there?
At one point, I employed a bunch of college students from Marymount, and one in particular, her boyfriend was from California. His parents came into the store and they pointed at a black and white cookie and they said, "What's that?" And I go, "You're kidding, right?" I thought they were like putting me on. And they're like, "No, what is it?" I said, "That's a black and white cookie." And then they proceeded to tell me they're from California, and they said, "We don't have that there." But it was like, it's like you don't have water, or I don't know the actual history of the black and white cookie, but it is an iconic New York Jewish bakery, right? It's not Italian bakery. It's a Jewish bakery. Almost like you have the rainbow cookies. There's Italian rainbow, and then there's Jewish style. The Jewish style it's not as fluffy, the cake. It has more marzipan, very different.
Is it supposed to be parve? Is that why?
I don't know. I don't know about that, but there's definitely a difference. Years ago, I tried to replicate what's called a Chinese cookie, but it was served at all the Jewish delis. And it's an almond-based cookie with a big dollop of chocolate in the middle. It's one of my favorite cookies out there.
I've never even heard of this cookie before.
Yeah. It's not technically Chinese, but it was brought over because a lot of Chinese immigrants had worked at all the Jewish delis, and they brought that over, and that was a staple there, and that's how they gave it the name. Unbelievable cookie. That almond flavor, you have a beautiful almond cookie and the best part is the chocolate in the center. And years ago, it used to be better chocolate. So you would eat the cookie around and wait for the chocolate. It's almost like, you ever have a king cone, you ice cream person?
What?
There's another iconic.
Is that like a dipped cone and something?
No, I think it's Good Humor. Okay. It's called a king cone. And you could look it up afterwards. And I don't even know if it was real ice cream. Didn't really matter. Came in a wafer cone, delicious. And on the very bottom of the cone was a whole bunch of solid chocolate.
Oh, that's the best part. Yeah. Okay. And it has peanuts. Like when you go to the gas station, you can get it.
Yeah. That's
the
king
best.
Cone.
Yeah.
That was we could talk about all the great ice cream out there. I think that's got to be up in the top 2.
Even the worst king cone is still very good.
Right. Whatever it was, it had peanuts on top. It had some chocolate.
Chocolate drizzled.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about pizza. I feel like even the worst pizza has a baseline of goodness.
Well, it is in New York. You go other places. I remember at the airport in Vegas, I was so hungry, and I forget what pizza's there. And it's just so bad. I think I put a post on Facebook or whatever and said they should just call it disgusting pizza and just call it what it is. Right?
Looking back on your career as an entrepreneur and a business owner, is there a business do-over that you would like to have?
I wish I would have probably started off with a little bit more money and I think a bigger vision. Again, I didn't really understand, I don't have a lot of business people in my family or really any business people that I wish I would have been able to, and some of it is just situational, right? Nobody predicted the financial meltdown. By the way, for me, not only was there a loss of business because people weren't going out to restaurants and the wholesale business, which was keeping Orwashers afloat, started to contract, but all of the commodities went up. Flour went up. All the gas went up. A lot of people in this room don't remember it, but it was numbers, right? So I bought a business. Here's the pro forma, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, your numbers are upside down. So I wish I was better capitalized when I first took over, and I wish I was able to think bigger at that point. But it is what it is, and I will give so much credit to my ex-wife. We risked everything we had, our house, life savings, you name it, for me to take over this business. And she worked her butt off, because in the beginning, there was no money to be made. I owe her that debt of gratitude.
Did you have a timeline? If you couldn't demonstrate profitability by a certain time, you'd bail, or no? It was like no going back once you invested.
I don't know how many people listen to your podcast. There were plenty of nights, and I'm going to be as honest as possible, in the first year that if I could drive off the bridge, I would have, right? But at the same time, I'm not quitting. It's not going to happen, right? Certain things are non-negotiable. Even though I felt like quitting, I showed up to work every single day. And it's a testament, I guess, to me. I'll give credit to my parents, whoever else. But those things where I wasn't going to allow myself to fail. I don't know how I was going to succeed, but I knew I wasn't going to fail. So you work from, what do they say? You work from the reverse or the opposite or the negative in order to move forward.
Is there any priceless piece of advice that has helped you as you ran your business or that you want to share with this group here?
I think I'm a good listener. I think I've found people that are smarter than me to bounce ideas off. I don't think I know everything. Certain things I'm pretty sure of, and I have gut instinct, okay? And that has helped propel the business. So we could look, if you did a linear chart, I've been successful and spot on. And other things, you have to reach out for help. And I think that's another thing that I probably wish I would have done more in the beginning, is ask for some more help. But then I just feel indebted to people, and I hate feeling that indebtedness as well. So, it's human frailty, right? We have all this. The main thing is that you learn, right? And I've noticed a lot of people, they don't learn. They keep making the same mistakes over and over again. So I'm a big fan of learning and moving past.
Yeah, iterating. No, it's very hard. And when you learn by doing, you look back and you're like, if I knew this now, I would have been, miles ahead of where I am today. There's always that. I could have known more. I could have done more.
But you can't teach experience.
Yes,
even though you want to. I'm a father. I tell my kids stuff. They think they're smarter than me, and they are. They are 100 times smarter than me, right? They're scholastic, all of it. But I've had life experience, and I've had a very different life experience than they have. It's every once in a while when they say, hey, Dad, you're right. That's one of my best accomplishments.
I was curious about the Jewish community for food after October 7th. You have a business that is very clearly Jewish and Jewish associated. Since October 7th, 2023, has anything changed for you, and how have you been navigating that?
It's been the status quo, right? I think we've seen some resurgence during the Jewish holidays, but it hasn't been marketable. And since I'm here and I'm feeling very honest, maybe we should have done more as a Jewish-owned business, right? To reach out, to do some of that stuff. But I also have other people that work for the company that would, be subjected to some of the stuff that went on in the city. So as a hub of Jewish culture for the U.S., there's been a lot of stuff that I don't find permissible here. And I don't want to go into a whole rant on it, but I will say this, that as the Jewish community and younger people, I'm older, I don't think what went on with the demonstrations, the stuff in the city, when I was young with my friends, that would have occurred. Okay, I think there would have been a lot more pushback.
There's a lawlessness.
There was a lawlessness. We were crazier Jewish kids, and our parents were way crazier Jewish kids growing up in East New York. We were tough people. I think it's unfair, and people can break me over the coals, that, our Jewish brothers and sisters in Israel, they send their kids, same kids as mine, out to fight. And some of them don't come home. And we didn't show up en masse here in the city to shut stuff down, okay? And push back and say, listen, everyone has the right to protest. We get it. We're in America, but it's not about Israel. Forget Israel, okay? I'm a Jewish American, so that is where I'm coming from, okay? And I think people from other countries, I guess your first language is Russian, are you from Russia, Ukraine, or Georgia?
Ukraine.
When you hear stories, it's a whole different level of being Jewish in those countries. But you had to stick up for yourself, too.
But that's, I think, the important part between prior generations and us. For example, one of my, I don't know if I'd call him a mentor, but someone who used to be part of the Jewish mafia, who's 86 years old. He's an ex-gangster. I'm very close with him.
New Jersey?
Yes.
Okay.
Myron Sugarman,
Yeah.
That's my guy. Yeah. So I'm his niece, quote unquote, which means I'm in the Jewish mafia. But I was talking to him about this, and he was just like, people need to know how to defend themselves, whether emotionally, spiritually, physically. You as a Jew have an obligation to learn how to fight back for yourself and for your community. And this is something that prior generations knew very well, but my generation and the one after me feels very comfortable not doing. And now we're at this fork in the road where some young Jews see it for what it is. And they're like, you know what? I got to step up for my community.
Right.
I need to know how to fight back, whether ideologically, whatever it is. And others are like, no, I'm just going to lay low and see if this passes by. And this has been the fork in the road for every Jewish generation. And all of us get to choose how we can show up. And just reminds me, you said I'm from Ukraine, and that we have these kinds of situations, and we definitely do, because growing up, my whole childhood, if you got in trouble at school or somebody was bullying you, my dad always had one answer, which was kick their ass.
Yes.
If they're hurting you, kick their ass. I don't care if you get suspended. I don't care if you get in trouble. I'll pick you up, but kick their ass. And so it's funny to me, because whenever I have that moment, that's my first thought, just kick their ass.
But that's a New York way, right? I will say
that's a Ukrainian way.
Well, I think it's kind of universal, but New York was a tough city at one point. I mean, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and the early New York was nuts. It was one of the scariest places here. But I also think it was expected, and even my sister got in fist fights. She got into girl fights. She was a tough girl. But it was expected for, boys to get into fights. It just was normal. Whereas, me raising my kids, you use your words. My kids have never been in a physical altercation. And what's going on in New York City, and it's still continuing, right? It still goes on here. Now they've targeted some Chabad house and this and that. Forget Columbia, right? So I'll say, people are shocked at what's going on at Columbia. And, there's a guy, a Columbian professor, Shai Davidai.
Yeah, Shai
right?
Davidai.
Right?
He's a former
Love him.
guest of the podcast.
Really? So he was at the Upper West Side store. I saw him there, and I was like, I was starstruck, right? And I wanted to buy him his food, but by the time he looked at me like, who's this crazy guy? But, if he's listening.
Exactly. Shai, if you're listening, you have a fan.
I saw him.
It was just Keith trying to buy your food.
What a great guy.
He does have a podcast, Keith.
Does he? Okay.
Yeah.
What a great guy. And, he's just outspoken. He put everything on the line. But I'll say this. My uncle is a graduate of Columbia, right? Dental school. And my aunt years ago, this is 20 years ago, said, he would have been first in his class, but they're super anti-Semitic at Columbia. But here's the weird part. Every Jewish family wants their kid to graduate Columbia. So, at some point, you're going to have to figure it out. You can't have it both ways.
So the interesting thing about that is I was thinking about it, and I forget who it was. There was some famous venture capitalist that used to work with Elon Musk who turned very far right-wing. Okay. And I think it was Lex Friedman.
Peter Thiel.
Yes.
Peter Thiel from the eBay, from the PayPal days.
Yes. And he had a podcast that I listened to. I think it must have been Lex Friedman or somebody like that, someone big that brought him on. And Peter talked about how kids who go to places that are super left-leaning or anti-Semitic and come in, let's say conservative kids, if they still come out of those 4 years staying as a conservative, then they really had to learn how to defend their positions in order to come out with that opinion still. So kids who are conservative who go to a highly liberal campus end up coming out smarter than liberal kids who go to a liberal campus because they don't have to defend anything. Everybody already agrees with them. They don't have to think differently or try to defend their point of view. And this came up over Donald Trump's son, who chose to go to NYU, a very liberal school where he's probably not well liked. And Peter said that kid's smart because he's going to come out having learned how to defend his views, talk about his positions, make allies. And that's a lot more valuable than already being in a place where everyone agrees.
Yeah, that is. And I think Jews, young Jewish kids, by and large, have not been able to defend the position. The fact that Israel is depicted as colonizers. It's crazy.
Oh, don't get me started.
That is the fact that the word genocide was hijacked. Okay. Those are the type of things that we shouldn't be allowed. Genocide is a Jewish word. I got in a huge fight years ago that somebody was calling when the border.
2021 or 2020.
When they were coming over and they were putting the kids in cages and everything else, which obviously is bonkers. But they called it a concentration camp. And I said, you can't use that. It's not the same.
Yes.
Okay. It's very different. And, we're in a society where words matter, all the nuances and microaggressions because of wordplay. And to be able to hijack words that are, you talk about Jewish food, there's also Jewish words, right? And I'm not talking about Yiddish, but genocide, concentration camp. We need to take back ownership of that. Okay, those are our words. Fine. You want to come up with a similar word? You can own that. Okay?
This is something I talk about at great length in another episode, but on college campuses in particular, Jewish students are not only uneducated on how to talk about being Jewish in Israel and feel like they can defend their views with people who don't agree with them. They don't have the curriculum. They literally just don't have the knowledge, first and foremost. But then, once again, I will take a dig at Hillel. Hillel is an organization that's meant to be the most inclusive Jewish organization on campus. And it becomes this issue of we stand for everything, so we stand for nothing. Mm-hmm. And they create what they call safe spaces for anti-Zionist Jews to come in and discuss their points of view, which is fine. But as a result of that, they've validated a position that's not very popular in the Jewish community. And they've created the perception that it's a lot more popular and shared than it is. Anti-Zionist Jews at most represent 5% of all Jewish people.
They're very good for public display.
Yes.
Okay, they make the headlines. And you have, what's his name, Norman Finkelstein, who talks about his parents are Holocaust survivors and this and that.
So my criticism of these kinds of organizations has been, it's okay if you want to let people have difficult conversations, learn about what they believe, ask questions that they feel are uncomfortable or, awkward. It's not okay to call yourself a Jewish organization and then not correct students who hold positions that are untrue, invalid, and harmful to the Jewish community. Yeah. If you want to call yourself a Jewish organization, you have to tell people what you believe is wrong. It's not true.
It's the untruth of it, right? So, listen, Jews, Israel are not beyond reproach. We're not perfect. But I think as a Jewish person, I shouldn't be held to like a ridiculously high standard. I'm a human being. We have our frailties. Israel has its frailties, but there shouldn't be two levels. Well, it's two levels. I mean, there's got to be 1,000 levels difference where Israel is held to standards that there's not one other country on the planet that's held to. That's the unfair part.
And it's the most painful when it's other Jewish people that then introduce that into the conversation and don't see that standard.
That's been going on.
Yeah, that'll always be the case.
That is the left leaning. And here's the weird part, right? So, I mean, I think Jews out of any ethnic group are probably the most liberal people on the planet, right? And then you have Israel. I mean, the Israelis are also very liberal, right? From what I understand, they're not thrilled with Netanyahu, and if they could throw him out, but they wouldn't throw him out in the time of war now, right? So that's never going to happen. You know, even October 7th, all those people living on the kibbutz, they were all peaceniks, okay? They were the most liberal people. They were the most liberal people out you can imagine on not on the planet, but it's really abhorrent that, you know, what happened on October 7th, right? Okay, forget what happened and transpired with Gaza after that. But on October 8th, October 9th, there were protests all over the street, right? Israel didn't lift one finger. You had 1,200 people, 1,500 people massacred, right? Hostages taken. And they were like protests against Israel. I think it's bonkers. And I don't think Jews have woken up yet. And it's sad. It's really sad that, you know, everybody wants to kind of still be low key. And at some point, we can't allow it to continue and have to have good retorts. And at the same time, just find stuff unacceptable, okay? Throwing stuff through a Jewish-owned business, through their window, and just purposely punching Jewish people in the face. Those type of things cannot be tolerated. You know, I'm a little too old to go out there and be a one-man leader, but I would call upon the Jewish community to really start standing up a little bit more and say it's not permissible. It's just not cool, because we always have helped other people. But I think as a community, we've always been the outspoken and joined forces with the underdog.
Yeah, and it was Rudy Rochman that said an interesting thing. He was talking to a girl who was scared to wear her Magen David because she was worried that she would get attacked or someone would say something to her. And he said, by not wearing your Magen David or by hiding the fact that you're Jewish, you are temporarily doing something that protects you, but you're actually harming the collective Jewish community in the long term. You're normalizing and implying that there's something wrong with being openly Jewish by making that choice. And I think it really changed her perspective. And for example, I recently moved and I wanted to put up a mezuzah outside. And my mom was like, please don't put a mezuzah. You live alone. What if someone kicks your ass? And I was like, Mom, what do you mean?
Well, isn't the mezuzah though supposed to be there to prevent it?
Well,
right? Isn't that the spiritual part of the mezuzah? It's supposed to.
This was also coming off of a recent theft that occurred with my brother. So my brother is a sophomore at the University of Minnesota. He lives in an apartment with roommates. Okay. All of them are non-Jewish except him. And they had a mezuzah in their apartment and it was stolen. So my mom had already seen this happen. And then here I am trying to put up my mezuzah and she's like, don't do it. And I was telling her, what do you mean? I'm in my own country. I'm a citizen of this country, a country that was built by Jews. What are you talking about? I'm not going to hide. What do I have to hide about? And if these are the same conversations that people had during World War II and other times that people were repressed during the Soviet Union, Jews were repressed. And I will never want to look back on my life and tell future generations, be it my kids, grandkids, that I was the Jew that was scared. I was the Jew that just wanted to be palatable and acceptable to non-Jews in order to get by. I'd rather just not be around at all then.
Soviet Union. I remember being in Hebrew school in Queens. We used to march all the time, especially in the Israeli Day Parade, for the refuseniks. I don't know what's his name? Ayatollah Sharansky, who's now in Israel.
Natan Sharansky.
He was the dissident.
The poster child,
Okay, so I remember that distinctly.
It's my goal to get him on the podcast, but I can't find his email anywhere. Okay. If you're listening and you have Natan Sharansky's email. And Keith, how can people connect with you on social media and learn more about Orwashers?
Well, they can contact our Instagram, Orwashers. We have info at Orwashers. Instagram is probably the best way to do it. I love connecting with people. Listen, one of the best ways, if you really want to connect with me, is come down to our store at 308 East 78th Street or 440 Amsterdam, or our latest store, if you're a Long Island listener, at 377 Willis Avenue in Roslyn Heights.
If you were going to try one baked good from Orwashers as someone who had never gone to Orwashers before, what would you pick?
You've really asked a very tough question.
Okay, I'll make it a little easier. You can pick one sweet, one savory.
For today, I think we do this Castelvolturno olive stick, which, doesn't seem so Jewish, but we add za'atar to it. So it has that little Middle Eastern flair. And we recently started doing this lace cookie. I mean, it used to be around a lot. It was tough to find. You find it more in Italian bakeries, not so much anymore. It's probably the best one out there. It is old school, 1970s, good Jewish or Italian bakery in New York City.
Awesome. Thanks. And I have one final question for you. Sure. It's one that I ask every single guest of the podcast. Who would you like to nominate for People Jew Want to Know?
I love him. He's a big fan of the bakery. And I loved him way before, I found out he was a fan of the bakery, but he even made Michael Rappaport.
Oh, of course. I would love to have him on.
Okay.
He's an icon.
He would be your best guest. Okay. And I think he would be your best guest for a really long time. I mean, he's a brilliant guy, outspoken, funny, and just really good Jew.
Thank you so much, Keith. It's been a delight.
I really enjoyed it. And if, in a year from now or two, you're looking for a guest, I'd like to be on again.
We'll have a victory lap.
Thank
Easy.
You. Okay.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please go ahead and rate us 5 stars. Be the first to hear our episodes by subscribing to People Jew Want to Know wherever you get your podcasts. And for exclusive content, follow us on Instagram at People Jew Want to Know.